Start recording now. You're good to go. Now I will start presenting. All right. Thank you all for coming to our Food Photography Workshop 101. This wouldn't have been possible without Asian Creative Network, so thank you so much for them. Yeah, let's get extra. I was going to get started, but let's get started and extra. Well, on the left here, I captured a quick GIF of Daniel taking a portrait shot of our friend Jill. She's actually also a foodie, and Daniel caught a shot of me taking pictures of food when we were hanging out at Daily Provisions just a couple months ago, pre-quarantine.
Jill is also an ACN, but I don't think she's here because she decided not to support us. That's okay, Jill.
The busy gal. Yeah, but let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Sean Chee. My IG handle is Sean Cheesecake. That's my personal photography one, and my food one, Sean Cheat Day. I've been doing photography for about 7 years. So that's just when I started picking up like a DSLR. I started shooting for fun a lot of the times, just with friends. And then I have 3 years of professional photography. So for me personally, I would define professional photography as the first time I got paid doing a gig. So that was when it kind of started it all, and it just kind of accumulated from there. I have been a past co-photographer for OMG It's Bomb, as well as a past co-moderator for Hangry Asians. And currently I shoot with a Canon 6D and my iPhone 8. The right side is just a quick shot that I helped do for Oishi Berry. Yeah, and I'm just passing it along to Daniel. Click the right. Here we go.
Oh, where's my photo?
Oh shoot, where is your photo?
Wow, sabotage me. Okay, I see how it is. Damn. Anyways, hey guys, this is Daniel. Wow, you guys are savage in the comments. So I've been doing photography for about 7 years. I started doing landscapes and portraits actually, and then eventually started getting into food. First it was through Snapchat when that was like a big thing. I would just send my friends photos of food in the middle of the night to torture them. And it eventually evolved into what it is now. Over the time, I've been featured on various things, Best Food Feed, City Grammars, Michelin Guide, Yelp, to name a few. I'm also the community lead for Best Food Feed NY. So if you guys follow that Instagram account, I'm one of the people that gets to decide which photos go up on the stories and get posted. And right now, I use iPhone X and the Sony a7R III for my photos.
Cool. Hitting next, it's a little slow. Just give it a couple seconds. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's because you added an animation.
I did not add an animation. You sabotaged me. So this is a milk bun ice cream sandwich from Winson. Yes, it's a photo from Winson. We can move on.
Nice. All right. I'm glad your photo showed up. Okay, next slide. Moving on. Hit right. Just taking some time. Okay. So yes, this workshop is free, but we highly encourage you to donate to our cause, which is towards Bento Essentials Fund. This is through the combination of the hard work of 3 restaurants, 886, Raku, and Whole Foods. So they've actually teamed up together and they're providing free bento lunches to healthcare workers. Your donations will help them make more bento boxes. You can send your Venmo donations to Daniel. That's his Venmo right there. And please do so by the 9th by midnight. You can find out more at the 886 Instagram account. Daniel, I know you messaged me before saying something about Venmo. Maybe you want to just vocalize that real quick here?
Oh yeah, so we'll include this in our email after the session, but sometimes if you're not connected to someone on Venmo, you need to add the last 4 digits of their phone number. So last 4 of my phone number is 4028. Play your cards right, you can get the first 3. But we'll have that in the post email too, so you can get your transactions coming through. We've already started getting donations even before the session, which is amazing. So thank you guys for being a part of this, for donating and helping us gather some funds to go for a really good cause.
For sure, yes. Absolutely. Moving on to the next slide, we're just going to show you some pictures from each of these restaurants from their Instagram, just to give you an idea of the kind of places you'll be supporting. Um, so I know 886 is a Taiwanese restaurant, Raku is a Japanese udon restaurant, and Whole Foods, I've never been there. Daniel, I think it's like Chinese, but not sure like what province or something.
How did you not do this research before? Just kidding. That is Chinese food.
Okay, yeah, because I see some rosong, the like roasted pork on the
Mhm.
top. Absolutely delicious. Okay, moving on. I think it's Daniel's turn to share some deets. Giving it some time. Okay.
Cool. So I know from the survey we have just a crazy range of experiences and backgrounds. People that have never really done any photography before, and then people that are super experienced and do this for a living. Um, so we're gonna keep these concepts and definitions on a 101 level just to get everyone up to speed, people that aren't as familiar. So we're gonna go through, and so basic concepts for photography. We have three kind of pillars, which is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And these all work together to generate the image that ends up on your phone or your camera. And on the right is like this really helpful diagram that helps you kind of see the relationships between these three pillars. So I'm gonna go from top to bottom, starting with aperture. So aperture controls the blur and is indicated by F and a number, which we call the f-stop. The lower the f-stop, the more your background is blurred. So on cameras, the lower this number, the wider your camera lens opens to receive more light, which also makes the photo brighter. The opposite is also true. So the higher the f-stop, the less your camera takes in and less light your camera takes in, darkening the photo, but you also get more of the background in your shot. So we got some questions about doing flat lays, shooting top down. Just want to call out here for those kind of shots, you're going to shoot at a slightly higher f-stops to get more of the dish when you're shooting top down. For me, that's typically around f4, but it really depends on what you're shooting. And if you see down here, we have Sean provided these really helpful pictures. The bottle on the left is shot at f1.4. So you can see in the back, it's very blurry. You can't really see what's back there. It's just really focused on the bottle. And the picture on the right, it's shot at f11. So you can see that, oh, that little figure circle is actually One Punch Man. Now, so moving on to the next bullet. So shutter speed. Shutter speed is how long your shutter remains open, or to just really speak in basic terms, it's how much time your camera spends to capture an image. So the longer your camera spends capturing an image, the more light it also captures, which also makes the photo brighter. But anything that moves during this process will get blurry. Sometimes you want this, but generally for food photography, you do not. And if you shake your camera while the shutter is open, the entire shot's now gonna be blurry. So you really have to keep that in mind when you're figuring out how to shoot your shot, and then keep the picture in focus. And the last thing here is ISO. ISO controls the overall brightness of the photo. The higher your ISO, the brighter your photo. However, higher ISOs also introduce more grain or noise, which will reduce the clarity of your photo. On iPhones, for example, when you tap to focus on something and you kind of drag up and you get like that little sunlight bar and it makes the photo brighter, what you're actually doing there is you're changing the ISO. So on this third picture on the left side of the slide, you can see the ISO here is 25,600. If you really pay attention, I think it's most helpful if you look at kind of the edges where it's kind of lighter, or even on that far right corner, you can see it looks a little hazy. There's kind of a color distortion there. If you compare it to, let's say, the blurred out section of the f1.4 shot to this one, you can see it's not clear. There's a little bit of, it looks like graining. So that is what we call noise. And sometimes when you're editing, you want to do it on purpose, but generally you try to prevent that. So you may have noticed when I'm going through these three options that all these three pillars control their individual element of a photo, but they all also contribute to the overall brightness or exposure of your shot. So for example, if you want to shoot a dish while you're still capturing the background, which means a higher f-stop, but you can't slow down the shutter because let's say you're holding the camera by your hand. So you're worried about shaking after you press the shutter. That means you need to bump up the ISO to brighten up the photo if it's too dark. So these kind of relationships might be a little overwhelming when you first get started. But as you get more experienced, the dynamics between these three aspects, how to make quick adjustments to produce the shot that you want, it'll become second nature to you. So it's one of those things where it just takes practice. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes. It's definitely taken me a while to kind of get the hang of how these three aspects work. But with practice, you'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes just beyond photography too, right? Whatever you do when you first start, you're not going to pick it up immediately. You'll have to give it time to you have to experiment by yourself, make mistakes. That's totally cool. I would say between these three pillars, for me, I think of it kind of like a scale. If you think of a scale, you usually have two sides, and whenever you change one side, something is off. So you have to amend for that in order for it to be balanced again. In this case, think of it as a three-way scale. When something is increased or decreased, you have to make up for the other two somehow, and you have to adjust accordingly in order to get the perfect exposure, hence the exposure triangle. Exposure just means it's the perfect amount of light. If it's overexposed, that means it's way too bright, and if it's underexposed, it's way too dark. Yeah. Yeah, so let's move on to the next slide. Thanks for that, Daniel. We will be talking about, come on, next slide.
And real quick, we had a question on tips for Android Pixel users. Regardless of whether you're on iPhone or Android, all these concepts that we're gonna go through, it carries over across any device or also like between mobile and camera. So while some of the apps available and all of that might be different, how you would go about achieving the photos that you want are gonna be the same.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, sorry, skipped ahead two by accident, but I went back. So right now we're going to talk more about basic guidelines of photography. This can be through your camera or through your mobile phone, either works. So this includes like iPhone, Android, HTC, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so first off, we have finding the sweet spot. When you're taking a photo, there are different angles that you can approach this from. You can approach it from straight ahead. You can approach it from top down. Other words for top down include aerial shots or flat lays. This all depends on what you're currently working on. It's just like a person. I feel like everybody has their good side. You can think of the same way through a dish that you're taking a picture of. At the same time, I think this is great to find your own personal style of shooting. For me, I'm not a big fan of like flat lays, although I did take a picture of Arden's dishes on the left side, and that was a flat lay. In this case, I thought that the natural light brought a lot of light overall to both dishes, and I wanted to capture that, along with the full shape and color of both of the literal dishes. So the circular plate and the little oblong shape there on the white dish. Yeah, so finding the sweet spot. Then it's focusing on the star. When I say the star, I mean the main thing of the dish. So if you were cooking up, I don't know, like maybe egg fried rice or something, I would say the main star would be the egg. So maybe you want to take a picture with the egg a little bit to the front. Always make sure it kind of shines, or it's just like present it in the right way that it should. You won't just be doing yourself a favor, but I think you'll be doing the chef a favor as well, because this is their presentation, their piece of art, and I think it should be presented that way through your photography. Then there's lighting your dish. We had a lot of questions coming from this. Think of it this way: when you're doing photography, light is your best friend. If you don't have enough light, then you won't be able to capture the full image that you want and all the details as well. For us, we think that natural light is the best way to go. When you're taking pictures, let's say in a restaurant, don't be afraid to maybe ask the waiter or waitress, like, hey, do you think we can sit by the window? Especially if there's space and you think it's a good question to ask. if it's not through natural light, then it's pretty tough when you are in a restaurant and it's like nighttime and there's not much light around. It's tough to get a good picture. It's like not just you, it's just because of the environment. For us, Daniel and I, we shop for restaurants before and we've invested in food lights. Food lights essentially is just a light, like an individual light that you can hold, and it's pretty powerful. You can actually use like a phone light as well, but with a food light, it like spreads out more. So we actually have a link towards the end of the presentation, which you can check out later, and you can see some images later on as well. Excuse me. And finally, we have a little more to your left and right. So this just means like food styling and making sure the composition is correct. First, you have the rule of thirds. I know for the iPhone you can do this, but you can actually change your settings and have this grid pop up. Essentially, for rule of thirds, it splits your screen into 3 columns and 3 rows. And whenever the lines intersect, this is basically where your eye just like naturally goes to. So whenever you're shooting, just take this into consideration and maybe don't center it all the time, but make sure you want to move it to a little bit to the left or to the right. Then you have negative space. Negative space is really important too. Negative space, it's basically the part of the photo that isn't your dish, right? So like that background space or something. I think you should always have a little bit negative space towards the bottom, the top, the bottom, the top, the left to right, just so you can have the composition in a really balanced manner. And then finally, you have obstructions. So when you're taking a photo, make sure there's nothing distracting. Nothing in the background, no like marks or distractions in the front or even on the dish itself. Sometimes when you're taking a picture of a dish of something, just take a napkin and go towards like around the dish so you can remove any oils or stains. It's really simple and easy to do. And when you're actually editing it post-process, you don't have to worry about any of this since you handled it in the beginning. So just going through everything again, you have finding the sweet spot, you have focusing on the star, lighting your dish, and composition, a little more to the left or to the right. And just some photos, one of Arden and one of Cha-Cha Matcha. Yeah, Daniel?
Yeah, and just to add real quick on the lighting piece, just want to call out, and this can sometimes be the case too when you're sitting by a window if the lighting through the window is too harsh. But when you're adding lighting to your photo, you're also adding 2 additional elements that you need to watch out for. And one is glare. So if the plate itself that the dish is on is really glossy or white, or like in my previous photo, it had like a condensed milk glaze on top.
You can actually look at the soju bottle like on the top because the light is so close and it's so powerful. So towards the top, it's showing that glare.
Right. So those kind of glares you want to watch out for. One way to soften up the light source if you're using a light is to just wrap it in a napkin so the white light is having to go through the napkin before it hits your food. That's a real easy, popular way to soften it up and prevent glares. Another thing that you're adding to the photo now is shadows. So be really mindful of the shadows that you're now casting with the light that you're using. You don't want to produce shadows that are now covering up parts of the dish that you want to show, because then you might have done even more damage by adding a light to the picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think about the light source and where it's coming from, because that's I guess you kind of have to mentally picture this. But then whenever the light hits the dish, right, where's the shadow being produced? If the light is towards the back and you're taking the photo, then wouldn't the front be all like dark? You wouldn't want that. So sometimes you might want to have the light source come from the front or maybe from the side. So always take this into consideration when taking your photo. Moving on. All right, cool. These are just some example shots that we took. Towards the left, I took pictures of Ricolt dessert bar as well as tabetomo. So just to explain our thought process and to break it down a little, for Ricolt dessert bar, I had 2 desserts. I wanted to feature the one in the front. So I made sure to use the rule of thirds to keep down the left side, and to use the rule of thirds for also the one on the right towards the background. But my focus right now, I'm using a low f-stop, so that's a high aperture, meaning the foreground is in focus and the background is not in focus. That is the star of my piece. And yeah, so that's Recall Dessert Bar. And then we have Tabe Tomo. You can tell here that I'm using a food light because of the glare coming off from some of the bowls. I would say the one right after the first one. And you can also tell the light source is coming from the front because the foreground is pretty lit up and the back is also like really dark. I guess you can also say that about Recall Dessert Bar. I also used the rule of thirds here, making sure my primary bowl was towards the right side. Um, and like for me, something that went on in my head was I made sure to put the chopstick on the bowl in the front in order to make it look a little different from the ones in the back. Maybe what I could have done differently is maybe done a noodle lift. So a noodle lift, I know this kind of sounds foreign to some people, but you would take the chopsticks, you would kind of like stick in your noodles, and then you would kind of rotate around to get a lot of it, and you just like lift up. Since I would be taking a photo, I wouldn't be lifting up the chopsticks, but I'll just give it to a friend. They can hold it, and then the shot can be taken. I'm so sorry, that is my dog. She's barking. Yeah, but that's my examples. I'll pass it on to Daniel.
Cool. So my shots, they're a little different. They're in portrait mode. So we'll start with the one more towards the middle. This is a dish from Brooklyn Fare. So, and you'll kind of notice as we go through the photos, Sean and I have like different styles, even though we agree on like the same concepts. So you'll find the same for yourselves too. As you get more experience, you'll just kind of develop how you want your own photos to look. For this one, when I'm thinking through what angle I want to shoot this in, this first one to me is obviously just like a straight ahead kind of shot. The reason is there are layers going vertically that I'm just not going to be able to capture if I shoot top down. Two is also because the light source is directly above me. So if I try to shoot this top down, it'll be a picture of my silhouette, which is not what I want. And you can actually tell right under the fish where the salmon roe is, it's a little darker. And the original picture when I took that was actually, that was all a shadow because of the light source being directly above. So I actually had to do some brushwork to lighten that up so you guys can get some more details of those fish eggs. And also in terms of light source too, there is a slightly related question, but in some environments, you're not gonna be able to use a light. Brooklyn Fare is a Michelin 3-star restaurant. They're not gonna allow that. So in some instances, you just kind of have to work with what you're given as well. One thing I could have done better here, and I think I actually noticed this while I was editing this photo originally, and I just was too tired to deal with it, to be honest. But the bokeh out or the blurred out lights up at the top of the photo, they're a little bit distracting. So I could have just kind of killed that a little bit, brought down the exposure there. Overall, that's my first picture. So moving on to daily provisions. This is actually Sean's hand. We went to this food event together, actually. So this is an example of one. Actually, we also used a food light for this one. And that gave me a few advantages here. One is Sean is pouring the sauce on the chicken and he's not stopping for us. He's moving at normal speeds, which means I have to capture this at a faster shutter speed. I also wanted to capture not just the chicken, but some of his hand. And also because of the angle I shot this in, I needed to capture more of the background to make sure I get all of the dish. So that also means a higher f-stop. So with those two things, and also trying to get it at an ISO where there's not too much noise, this photo would have been really dark. But because we had external light sources, food lights helping us light this dish, I was able to capture this shot and come out with a really clean photo. That's it. Unless you have anything to add, Sean. Oh, also, actually, I have something to add. I'm gonna go back to Sean's picture because I think the Recall Dessert Bar is a really great example of being mindful of your composition. Because one mistake that I still make a lot is I don't pay attention to the dishes in the background sometimes. So you see how the colors here are very similar to the dessert in the back. So if he were to have shot this a little more to the left, the blurred out dessert in the back, those colors would have merged with what he's trying to draw your attention to, and it wouldn't have stood out as much. But because he has a little bit of negative space between the two desserts, it really pops. And then the dessert in the back is just a nice accompaniment, rather than a distraction.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I muted myself a little bit just because of my dog. But yeah, just going back to Recold Dessert Bar a little bit. Imagine, I think it's a lot of experimentation, right? So imagine the picture. Imagine that dish that's popping out on the right side just a little bit. Imagine that was like out, right? If it was out, I think there would be too much of that brown table, and I think I don't know. Personally, I just don't think it would work as well. But just because I slipped that in like just a little bit, or I took the picture just how it was presented and it came out like that, I think it just gave a little bit, it was a little bit better. These are things that like after the first picture you take, maybe you want to look back at it to see if everything works out correctly and if you need to make any adjustments afterwards. Yeah. Going to Daniel's Brooklyn Fair shot is actually like one of my favorite shots from him. If you look, so he's going, he's taking it from like right in front, but it's so symmetrical. Like I guess he is using the rule of thirds as well, but just like centering everything. The dish is the star of the show, right in the center. You have this like perfect alignment of the circle coming from the bowl, and you can tell that the light source isn't directly in front, but it's from kind of like an upper angle. You know this because of the shadow coming from the bowl, and it gives this like perfect circular motion too. So I think artistically, it's a very like great shot taken by him. You are an artiste, Mr. Daniel Chang. Okay, moving on.
I'm not used to getting compliments from you, so I'm speechless.
All right, I think it's taking some time to shift. Whoa, way too much. Okay.
Wow, you're trying to just skip all my slides.
Sorry, dude.
Jeez.
All right.
So we're gonna go into editing on mobile. So there's so many apps out there, but we want to touch upon kind of two and really kind of just one really popular one that's available whether you're on Android, Pixel, or iPhone. So that's Snapseed and Visco. So on the left part of the slide, we have just screenshots of the available tools. So between Snapseed and Visco, and also majority of photo editing tools that are decent, have all the same features. So we're gonna go through a video of me kind of editing and narrating what I'm doing on Snapseed, but all the tools and techniques that I'm using are also gonna be available on Visco. So regardless of what phone you're on or what app you're using, you're gonna be able to take these techniques and just apply it directly to whatever that is. So before actually, I think I mentioned in the video. So Sean, if you want to start and full screen.
You got it. You got it. Also, editing, let me tell you, it does wonders. It does magic to your photos. So take the best photo you can. If it doesn't look the best, editing it will fix it right up. So I'm going to start this video. Let me know if you guys can hear it. Daniel, you especially, and let me know if you need me to pause anywhere. Yeah. I pressed play. I don't know. Okay. Audio.
This photo is soupy rice from Wayla, which is
I'm gonna pause it. Do you guys hear that? You guys like hear Daniel talking in the video about Wayla?
I hear it on my end.
Okay. Okay, Sean says yes in the chat. Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna keep playing. Daniel, pause me at any moment.
Do you want to full screen it? Because I think parts of it might be hard to see if it's not.
Okay, let me try that. For sure. I'm gonna exit presentation mode. It's like really laggy. I'm gonna play it. And I'm gonna full screen it.
All right.
You guys still see this?
We're in Snapseed. This photo is soupy rice from Wayla, which is one of my favorite time restaurants in Manhattan.
Thank you, Anita.
So we're gonna go edit this. First thing I'm gonna do is figure out how I want to crop this photo. So we're gonna go to crop here, and for me, I'm gonna be editing this photo for Instagram. So that means I'm gonna want to crop to a square or to 5/4. So if we try a square, this photo is way too tight. In general rule of thumb, when you guys take photos, you want to leave room around what you want to capture to give you guys some breathing room and marginal area when you're cropping. So should have followed my own advice here, but square is not going to work for this shot. 5/4, however, that actually looks pretty good to me. So we're going to go with 5/4. Now we're gonna go to the tune image option on the top left here. And here we have pretty much the most important tools for mobile editing on Snapseed. So these are all the options. Typically, when photo editing app designers kind of think through their layout, they kind of do this top-down approach that matches the workflow of most photo editing. So here, when I edit too, I kind of go from the top to the bottom. So I'm going to start with brightness here. Brightness is going to affect the overall exposure of your shot. So I'm going to drag this up, but I'm going to put it a little below where I want the final image to be. And I'll show you why.
Hey, Sean, if you want to mute it, I can just dub over it, like
Okay, sure.
movies where you dub it over, because the audio is getting...
All right, no worries. I'm gonna
All right, technical difficulties. We're just going to totally wing this, and
play.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes.
All right, you're adjusting the brightness right now.
Yeah. Sorry, so just to start, and this is the parts that I missed, and I've edited and recorded this. Wait, can you pause that?
Yeah. Pause.
Sorry. So just to I don't know what people heard, but I think, so the parts that kind of dropped out, just to reiterate, and I've recorded and edited this video like 50 times, the same photo, so I kind of know this by heart now. But first, what I was saying is I'm going to start by cropping it. And because I'm editing this photo specifically for Instagram, I'm cropping it either to a square or the portrait ratio, which is 4/5. So what I first was saying is when I tried to crop it to a square, it was too tight. As Sean mentioned earlier, there wasn't great negative space. It kind of makes you look like I'm shoving your face into the bowl of soup, which is not the approach that I'm going for. Also a common mistake I see a lot of food photographers make. The food is just too close. Stop trying to feed me. So I'm gonna move this to 4/5, and pretty much that's the crop that I was gonna stick with. I also showed you guys right after, there's an option to rotate photos as well. But for this shot, I was completely fine without rotating it. So we moved on.
I'll go to the brightness section.
And yeah, so right after I crop, what I do is I go into
I played it.
the tune tool, or it's on the top left. Can you backtrack a little bit, actually?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Here we go.
Yeah, so tune image. So I go there, and the way this is laid out, and most photo apps are like this, is they lay it out so that you can edit from top to bottom, and that's kind of the workflow that generally makes sense for a lot of photographers. So whether it's a photo editing app or Lightroom, a lot of times you'll see them editing in a top-down order, and that's just because it's already been laid out in a way that kind of makes sense. So I start from top down too. First thing I did was I adjusted the brightness to the shot, but I brought it just a little bit below where I wanted the final picture to be. And I did that because right after, I knew I was gonna adjust the highlights. So if I brought the exposure up to where I want it to be and then started adjusting the highlights, then it would be too bright. So here, I guess the video is going again. So I'm showing you what it looks like when the highlight's all the way on the bottom, and now what to do when it's all the way at the top. So we're gonna go down and bring it to where I wanna be. And
Daniel, is it cool we just 2 times the speed real quick?
yes.
Okay, for sure. Just to save some time. All right, it's 2 timing right now.
Cool. So we're at highlights, and that's about where I want it to be. Now I'm gonna bring it to the shadows. Same thing here. I'm paying attention to the darker areas of photos, making sure I'm not making it too dark or too dark. I'm just trying to add a little bit of contrast without using the contrast slider. I want to edit this photo more explicitly, so I'm bringing it down to where I feel comfortable, which is around there, -18, and we're gonna leave it there. So last thing I do for this one is the warmth. So for me personally, I like my shots to be a little bit more cooler. So I just showed you what the 2 extremes look like. So for me, I'm gonna bring it to a place where I think the white parts of the dish, like the rice, are white. It's how they're supposed to be. And then I bring it a little bit down. So that's about where I want that to be. And so I'm showing you a comparison of how it was before editing and after editing there on Snapseed. You can do that by holding down the photos. Now what we're gonna do is play with the sharpening tool. So this adds more structure to the image, which overall gives the image of being sharper. One mistake that I see a lot of people making is making the overdoing this tool. If you drag it all the way to the right, you see what happens to the soup there. You can really start seeing the oil and the fats in the soup. It looks less appetizing. And also for me, at least, when I see pictures that are over sharpened, it just starts looking dizzy. It makes me dizzy. So you don't want to overdo this. You want to bring it to a point where the areas that you want to sharpen are getting there, but not doing it too much. For me, I'm paying attention to the rice that's on the spoon. It's not as sharp as I want it to be. So I'm gonna start bringing it up to where the rice is like getting sharper, but it's not ruining the soup and making it unappetizing.
Okay, here you go.
Okay, so that's about good. So we're gonna leave that there. So here I'm going into sharpening tools. So sharpening tool, it's not as obvious to tell the difference sometimes. I'm gonna drag this all the way to the right so you guys can kind of see the difference. Pay attention to the rice. I think that'll help the most, or even the soup. But with this tool too, it kind of sharpens up the edges. But same thing, you don't want to overdo it. Just bring it to where you want it to be. So from here, the photo's already looking a lot better. I'm gonna add some Vignette. So Vignette either darkens or lightens the edges of your shot. So I started using Vignette for my food photos a lot because for me, it's like an easy way to really draw people's attention to the star of my shot, which for me, with my style, is generally more centered. So I'm showing you how it looks at both extremes. Like everything else, you want balance. You don't want to overdo it. I just want to add a slight vignette to darken up the corners and really draw your attention to what's on the spoon. So there's the before, or I just went through the before and after. Next thing we're gonna do is up top, you still see the dishes, the cups. They're a little distracting, even with the vignette added. So I'm gonna do some brush work here to remove those. So I'm gonna, what?
An artiste.
So I'm gonna use the exposure brush to -1. And if you click the eyeball icon on the bottom, it'll show you where you've brushed. So this is how it looks with one brush. I want to darken it more, so I'm gonna layer a second brush on top. And you can see the top parts being darkened. And I kind of brushed over some of the bowl and the spoon too. I'm not too worried about that. It's not gonna be too noticeable. Don't worry about being so precise with this. So with the darkness, I'm pretty good here, but I'm not happy with the red kind of glare that's still shining in the background. So I'm gonna use a third brush, but this time I'm gonna use a saturation brush. So saturation affects color. Either it's gonna be bright, it's gonna be more vibrant, or less. So I'm removing the saturation and you guys can see how the redness is now gone. And now those glares are just white. And I'm actually pretty happy with how this photo is right now. So this is gonna be my final photo finished editing. So I'm gonna export that. So when you're exporting in Snapseed, just use that final export button on the bottom. And that was it.
Woo! Great job doing that.
That may have been really fast for some people, but afterwards I can answer any questions and all that.
Absolutely. Cool. Thanks, dude. We're going to do this last part and then basically wrap this up. Right before I go on talking about editing on desktop, aka I will be screen sharing and talking about Adobe Lightroom, talking about importing, rating the content, cropping it, editing it, and then exporting it. I'm just going to say we do have some resources that we've listed out on the presentation deck. and we're going to be emailing this to everybody. So you can like check all these out. We really recommend you to just go on YouTube, type in photography tutorials. Like there's a lot of great material out there, not just like these 5 and this LED light recommendation. A lot of information, so please check it out. We have actually given these photos via a link. Daniel, do you mind just pasting it in again so it's like fresh in the chat? So if anybody has not downloaded it yet to use it for Lightroom, you can. If you don't have Lightroom, totally okay. Just follow along with us over here. You can feel free to purchase the Adobe Creative Suite. This isn't ad, this isn't sponsored, or you can feel free to like torrent it if you can. This is basically what you would do on mobile, except doing it on a desktop. It will have a lot of the same features. So if you don't have Lightroom, that's totally okay. Follow along with us, no problemo. If you do use any of these photos, just share it with us. You can feel free to DM us, tag us, just let us know if you want any critiques or feedback. We got you. Without further ado, let me actually share my Lightroom, and then we can get started. So
while he's doing that, just to call out, so these photos that we provided, they're actually JPEGs. So even if you don't have Lightroom, but you want to practice editing on your phone and do some mobile editing, you can totally do that as well.
Yep. Is it this one, I think? Okay, I think my Lightroom should be shared right now. Daniel, do you think you can answer that? There's one question from Holly from Q&A, I think about like indoor lighting, indoor photos.
Indoor photos.
Oh, I mean, I guess I can answer that real quick since I'm looking at it now. But taking photos for outdoors, I think outdoors is the best place to take photos, especially if it's daytime, because you're getting a ton of natural light. So for the most part, I think you're good. Just make sure the sunlight isn't that harsh. If the sunlight is harsh, that's essentially like you holding a food light and the glare is really overpowering. So make sure there's not too much sunlight, but make sure it's just enough. If it's in the dark, if it's like nighttime and you're taking it outdoors, rest in peace. You'll probably need a food light or light source of some type. Hope that answers your question. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to talk about editing in Lightroom. So first, importing photos. After you start up Lightroom, you can go to the library section, and there's this section called import. If you click this, what you will be doing is you're importing something, let's say from an SD card on the left side, and you're either copying it, moving, or adding it to another destination towards the right side of your screen. I usually have an external hard drive in which I put everything in. So this is like my external hard drive, and I've actually categorized it based off of like things that I do. So here's my food. And if I click 886, yeah, basically these are like my edited photos afterwards, so don't worry about that. You can just put into a subfolder and then name it something. Cool. I have mine imported, so I'm going to cancel it. From library, after it's in, it'll basically look a little something like this, like everything's posted. So I try not to take at least just like one photo. I try a couple. I try not to go too crazy though, because like the food stays still for the most of the time, so you don't have to keep clicking away. But sometimes I might want to get the composition right, and maybe I want to make sure it's not blurry. So I'll take a couple just in case. From library, I'm going to go into develop. This is where the editing starts, yeah? Daniel, can you let me know if there are any questions that might pop up? So
yeah,
I don't know if I'm
watching it
or anything. Cool. Okay, so we're going to go to the develop side. I'm going to work with the ones that I labeled yellow. You can actually label it like 1 star to 5 star or any colors. You can do that through your keyboard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the star labels. And then I think 6 to 0 are your color labels. So if I click 6 on this, you'll notice that turns red. If I click 6 away, if I like click it again, then it removes the red label. I'm going to work with the ones that are yellow filtered. So we're going to work on this chicken one. Or maybe I'm going to work on this like this Nil Fan. I think, what does that translate to? Like pork braised rice. My Chinese is fail, yes. I'm going to reset this. And this is basically how it looks like when I first took it. So I think you guys should have that image within the drive folder that we sent you. I'm gonna maximize my screen. Okay, so first, I always look at the composition first. I see if everything is aligned correctly. So I'm going to go to the crop section. I'm going to rotate this, the angle. It's like pretty much good, but I'm just gonna do it a little bit. That should be fine. Composition. So I'm thinking rule of thirds now. I definitely want these eggs to be shown, so I'm not gonna cut it off too much on the right side. If I were to change my shot, I think I would have more negative space on my right. Do you see that I just captured the bowl? I wish I had like a little bit more black on the right side, but unfortunately not. I'm just going to shrink this a little bit because I think there's too much negative space up here. So I'm going to shrink that. And I'm going to move that up a little bit. Oh, I zoomed in. What happened? Okay, that's cool. So composition's cool. I'm going to bump up the exposure right away so I can get that. Guys, did you see that? Just like by one click of a button, I just transformed like night into day, right? It looks so much better just with editing. I'm just going to put up the exposure just to see what I'm working with to actually like visualize it. I'm going to go up to my white balance here. For me, when I edit, I always want to make sure the photo is as natural as possible. I don't want to do too much editing in which it makes it look just like a totally different dish. So I'm going to hold my temperature over here, and that's changing it from cool to warm, just what Daniel did when he did his edits. But I'm going to change it just like that. So before it looked like this, and after it looks like this. Usually I keep mine to the warm side, but I think by neutralizing the warmth a little, it makes it more natural. I'm gonna go to the tint, and that changes it between green and purple. And I'm going to do the same thing. Just see how it looks like, play around with it, see what looks good. So I just moved it up by 2, no big deal. Gonna keep going, keeping the exposure. Contrast, sometimes I change it, sometimes I don't. I'm just gonna bump it up by a little bit to give it more of a contrast. Highlights, this is like the glare coming off from the light, right? So if I show you the extremes, it like takes away completely or it bumps up all the way. Let's see what I want. I want it to be a little bit more like a 5. And then I'm going to use my brush later, and I'm going to touch up on the food to make sure it's not too overbearingly bright. Shadows, that's the shadows. It's particularly for the stuff in the back. I think for me, I'm going to bump it up just a little bit because I actually want it to pop just a little bit for me. Whites help the whites, blacks help the blacks. If we're actually talking about race, we all help each other, haha. I think I'm going to bump it up just a little bit for the whites. Blacks, I don't want too much of a contrast, but just a little bit. So I'm going to bump it up down just a bit. And then clarity, this is kind of like sharpening it. I'll show you if it's way too much. Wow, that looks, no thank you. Under, that like blurs everything. So we're just going to bump that up a little bit too. And then vibrance and saturation, that deals with the color. I'll just show you how it looks like from the extremes. Cool. Again, just a little bit. I'll change this to like a 4 and a 6 for saturation. Cool. So just by touching on the tones, I've already improved it this much. I'm going to hit Y on Lightroom, and this shows me the before and after. It's not a dramatic change, but it is enough in order for you to tell that this is much more of an appetizing photo. Moving down, there's the HSL, the hue, saturation, luminance. Saturation talks about how like powerful the color is, or how bright the color is, I believe. And luminance is, I think saturation is how powerful and luminance is how bright. Hue changes it on the color spectrum. So if I change only the reds on the photo, if you notice the like chili on the back here, we can notice only that is changing, right? Because there's only red here. So that's essentially what HSL does. Let's say I wanted to only work with this green. I'm gonna choose this adjustment tool. I'm gonna click here and I'm gonna click on the wherever I want. If you notice, whenever I'm hovering over something, you'll notice over here, like it kind of indicates, it kind of figures out what color it is and it'll adjust from there. I just want green, so I'm gonna click, hold, I'm gonna drag up, and that changes the saturation or it decreases it. I just wanna bump it up a little bit, so I'm gonna keep it like there. maybe 45. I'm gonna manually change. That's like perfect the way it is. Real quick, just showing you before and after. Before, after, very slight change, but I think me, with more experience, I get very particular. So it's the kind of stuff I work with. Split toning, I think of an Instagram filter. This changes it and gives it a certain like filter, right? I don't really mess around with this. I'll bump up the saturation a little here, and then I'll change the hue and see if it might look better with a certain highlight. Maybe like that. So I'm gonna turn it off. Yeah, and turn it on. So I like it. I think it's fine. I don't really touch the shadows. I don't really add vignettes. That's just not my style particularly. And then that's usually all I work with from here. And then I go into the brush tool. Brush, so you're only focusing on a certain part of the picture that you're working with. You can like do this, like whatever settings, and you can save it as a preset, but I've actually created one for food. So these are like my presets. I forgot to change this, but my highlight's supposed to be like -9. So very similar to the tones before, except this is my preset. And I'm just gonna brush over my food. So just the center. And if I click O, this shows you my brush strokes and where I hit. I can keep stroking, and that'll like make it a little bit more like it'll resonate more on a certain area. But if I remove this, that's how it looked like before, and that's how it looked like after, just brightening up just a little bit. And I think from there I am done. If I think I'm comfortable with everything, when I imported it, it was at 0. Now I think it's great. I give it a 5, in which I did. And then, oh shoot, I think the meeting ended.
No,
Wait,
you're
no?
still here.
Are people still here?
We're still here.
Okay, sorry. My thing was being stupid. My phone. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Really quick, right click, export, click export. Give it a name. So yay, finished. You can start it off by a certain number. I always put it on 1, and I can put it in a specific subfolder in a folder of my computer. But since we're done, since this is just for test purposes, I'll just click export. It's gonna put it in my external hard drive. I'm gonna cancel since I'm not actually doing this. And basically that is it, guys. I'll show you before and after. Before, after, big change. But yeah, that's editing through Lightroom. I'm gonna stop share so we can go back to our pretty faces. That's basically it. Thank you guys so much for coming to our workshop, sticking it along with us for an hour long. We really appreciate it. Daniel, any like last words, anything? So just quick mention.
Last words. Wait 1 second. I think we have, oh, never mind. We don't have more questions. Yeah, thank you guys for coming, for attending. I've been seeing donations pouring in through the session, which is so amazing. We're going to leave this open until the 9th, the end of the 9th, 11:59 p.m. EST. So if you're able and you feel compelled, please just send us whatever you can. We're really excited to get these funds over to the Bento Essential Fund and have it go towards something great. I think it's like a perfect marriage of something we're passionate about, which is food photography and the food industry, and helping them help healthcare workers who are fighting COVID. So this is a really great cause. And before we wrap up, I guess, do you want to do any last minute questions, or do we not have time? How do we?
Why don't we, if you guys have any questions, just DM us or come to the other chat. We actually posted on the Facebook group. We'll be jumping on right after. And you guys can answer your questions there. No problem. I just want to say, like, yeah, thank you again for coming. I think even if photography is super new to you, I just want to say you might not like it, right? Like, I think everything is just trial and error. But definitely put in your time and experience, especially during quarantine, because, like, quote unquote, we have like more time. Experiment, right? Anything you cook, your parents, your siblings, your spouse might cook, like, take a picture of it, edit it from there, and see how it turns out. If you need any critiques, we are open to help. But yeah, and thank you so much for donations too. I think it's very important during this like COVID time to not just be a photographer or a painter or a dancer or anything, but just to be a human being and to give back where we can. So thank you from the both of us, from ACN. Really appreciate it. We'll see you in the other chat if anything. If not, enjoy your life, guys.
See you
All
guys.
right. We'll send you the recap probably in a couple hours. Thanks. Bye.